There are moments when the soul whispers truths the ego can no longer ignore. When two paths cross in an intense, challenging and transformative connection, it is not just about love. It is a mirror revealing what is deepest and most hidden within us. This kind of encounter, often mistaken for obsession or idealization, is in fact an ancestral call to wholeness. When the journey between two mirrored souls reaches its final stage, the signs are not subtle. They cry out for awakening, healing, and integration. But how can one know if this stage has already begun? In this video, we will explore the unmistakable signs that the final process between twin flames is already in motion and what it truly represents in the light of analytical psychology. If you feel something deep is shifting within you, leave a comment. I am ready to fully integrate my soul. From Carl Jung's perspective of analytical psychology, the relationship between twin flames is not simply a romantic narrative, but a profound metaphor for the process of individuation, the path towards psychic wholeness. Jung understood that every human soul is dual, containing both conscious and unconscious elements, as well as the inner polarities of the masculine, animus, and the feminine, anima. When two people meet as twin flames, what truly manifests is a direct confrontation with the denied parts of oneself, the shadow. The shadow, according to Jung, is the unconscious aspect of personality that the ego refuses to accept. In a twin flame relationship, this shadow is constantly mirrored, provoking intense emotional reactions, separations, and reconciliations. These highs and lows are not signs of failure, but of the alchemical process necessary for transformation. Another crucial point is projection. Jung explained that we tend to project onto others the parts of ourselves we have not yet recognized. With a twin flame, this projection is magnified to the extreme, forcing us to break free from illusions and idealizations. It is through this crisis that the true self begins to emerge. When the final stage of this journey approaches, it is no longer about the other, but about oneself. The integration of animus or anima, the transcendence of the shadow, and the dissolution of projections mark the beginning of a new consciousness. The external union becomes a reflection of the inner union. Therefore, the final stage between twin flames is, in Jung's view, the culmination of a deep process of self-knowledge and reconciliation with all aspects of the psyche, a symbolic rebirth that transcends the ego and leads to individuation. In the twin flame journey, there is an inevitable moment when the ego begins to collapse. This process may feel painful, unsettling, even destructive, but in truth, it is the sign of something sacred, the preparation for true union. According to Jung's analytical psychology, the ego is a necessary but limited psychic construction. It helps us navigate the world, build identity, and function socially. However, when it comes to experiencing the self, the deepest and truest core of the psyche, the ego must yield. The connection between twin flames acts as a catalyst for this dissolution. At the beginning of the journey, it is common for both individuals to still operate under the dominance of the ego. Desires, insecurities, idealizations, fears, control. But as time passes, the intensity of the bond begins to destabilize these structures. Not because the relationship is failing, but because it directly confronts the false constructions we hold about who we are, about love, and about the other. The ego, by nature, seeks separation. It thrives on duality, me and the other, right and wrong, control and surrender. The soul, on the other hand, seeks unity. When a twin flame enters one's life, it exposes this split in a radical way. We begin to live through deep conflicts. We want closeness but feel fear. We long to surrender but try to control. We love but resist. These tensions are not signs of dysfunction, but of the archetypal work of the psyche unfolding. The relationship becomes the stage for a battle between ego and soul, between control and surrender. Over time, the ego begins to lose its power. This loss does not occur passively or comfortably. It often comes with existential crises, identity confusion, feelings of emptiness, and emotional breakdowns. In Jung's light, this represents the crossing between persona, the social mask we wear, and the encounter with the self. The twin flame, through profound mirroring, unmasks the ego's idealizations. The pain this generates is not failure, but purification. We are being led to release what we are not, in order to discover what we have always been. The dissolution of the ego also marks the end of trying to control the journey. At this stage, there is no longer urgency to force meetings, define labels, or expect from the other what we still lack within ourselves. The focus shifts inward. Love, once projected and demanded, begins to grow from within. This does not mean that external union is discarded, but it loses the weight of neediness, emotional dependence, and constant validation. The being begins to stand on its own. And it is precisely here that fertile ground for true union is created. When Jung speaks of individuation, he describes this process as a journey toward wholeness, in which all aspects of the self, light and shadow, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious, are embraced and integrated. The twin flame relationship follows this same path. The dissolution of the ego is the first step toward this integration. It empties us of false identities, so we may recognize the other's essence without the filters of projection, fear, or expectation. In this final stage of the journey, there is no longer a struggle for control. There is surrender, not passive surrender, but a conscious yielding to the flow of life, to the process of self-discovery, and to love that transcends the ego. The twin flame ceases to be an object of desire and becomes recognized as a sacred mirror, a soul partner whose main purpose is not to complete us, but to remind us of who we are. Thus, when the ego begins to dissolve, we are not losing ourselves. We are in fact finding ourselves. And this inner reunion is the true gateway to the union of flames. As the twin flame journey advances toward its final stages, something curious begins happening more often, a significant increase in synchronicities. These meaningful coincidences, as Jung called them, stop being rare occurrences and start forming a symbolic communication pattern between the unconscious and the external world. Synchronicity, according to Jung, is the external manifestation of an internal psychic connection. And when two souls are being led toward wholeness, the universe seems to conspire to align their paths, not through linear logic, but through profound meaning. These synchronistic events are not for entertainment or mere spiritual curiosity. They carry clear messages from the collective unconscious, signaling that something greater is at work. Unexpected encounters, repeating numbers, vivid recurring dreams, phrases or songs that appear at crucial moments. Everything seems to conspire to push the individual inward, closer to the essential truth of their soul. Especially within twin flame dynamics, these synchronicities act as archetypal compasses, guiding both halves of the divided soul toward reintegration. What distinguishes synchronicity from simple coincidence is its emotional impact. When something synchronistic occurs, it is not uncommon to feel a shiver, an inner silence, a sense that this means something. In Jungian terms, this impact is a clear sign that the unconscious is attempting to communicate with consciousness. In other words, it is the self calling us to pay attention to the path of individuation. And when this kind of phenomenon intensifies between twin flames, it indicates that the process of inner and possibly outer union is accelerating. Jung believed that the psyche is autonomous and possesses its own wisdom. The symbols and archetypes that emerge through synchronicity are expressions of this deep intelligence. As we approach the final stage of the twin flame journey, the unconscious begins to guide with greater clarity, as the ego, once rigid and resistant, is now more flexible. This allows the individual to become receptive to symbolic signs pointing toward wholeness. Wholeness, in this context, does not mean perfection, but integration. It is when light and shadow coexist, when anima and animus are acknowledged and embraced, when the being ceases to live in fragmentation. Intensified synchronicities point to this integration as an inevitable destiny. They show that linear time is no longer the only reference. We are dealing with chirological time, where everything happens at the right moment in the time of the soul. Another important aspect of these synchronicities is that they do not only involve the couple. They may involve family members, places, religious symbols, works of art, or collective events. This occurs because the process of union between twin flames is not only personal but archetypal. It touches the collective unconscious, and therefore its manifestation expands into the shared symbolic field. The psyche responds with images, patterns, and events that expand consciousness and call the individual to a state of deep presence. In the final stages, these synchronicities may become so constant, they form almost a secret language of the soul. They comfort, confirm, challenge. Instead of seeking answers in the other, we begin to seek meaning in the invisible. And this is one of the greatest signs the journey is reaching its climax, when the need for external proof gives way to inner trust, guided by symbols that no longer need translation, only experience. Synchronicity is, therefore, a constant reminder that we are neither alone nor adrift. The soul knows the way, and when twin flames approach wholeness, the universe makes it clear, not with words, but with signs, that the moment of sacred union, internal and external, is approaching. The call is clear. The answer depends on the courage to follow the unseen. The twin flame journey is marked by emotional intensity so deep that often the reality of the other person merges with the unconscious fantasies we carry through life. It is natural to project onto the other our idealizations, fears, needs, and expectations. But as the relationship moves toward its final stage, something transformative occurs, the collapse of these projections. And it is in this collapse that real love begins. Jung warned that projection is one of the most powerful and dangerous mechanisms of the psyche, because it prevents us from recognizing the other as they truly are, replacing them with an unacknowledged inner image. At the beginning of the journey, it is common for the twin flame to be seen as perfect, redemptive, almost divine. This idealization works as an inverted mirror, reflecting all that we lack in ourselves. We project anima or animus, the inner feminine or masculine, onto that person, without realizing that what we love is not the other themselves, but our psychic image of them. However, with time, and especially as the connection matures, this projection begins to fail. The other begins to reveal flaws, limits, contradictions, and with this, illusions fall away. This collapse can be devastating for the ego. It is often accompanied by distancing, resentment, frustration, and even the sense that the connection has lost its shine. But what is truly happening is that the veil of projection is being torn, revealing the real soul behind the mirror. And this is essential, because loving someone based on an idealized image is a conditional form of love. Recognizing the other in their wholeness, with both light and shadow, and remaining present, however, is an act of true, deep, and transformative love. Jung maintained that every meaningful encounter between two souls is also an encounter with the unconscious, and the only way to make this encounter conscious is to withdraw projections. This does not mean ceasing to love, but beginning to love in a more whole way. In twin flame dynamics, this process is even more intense because the mirroring between the two is brutal. Everything we deny in ourselves appears in the other, and in recognizing this, we are invited not to reject, but to integrate. In the final stage of the journey, as projections begin to collapse, two possibilities arise: to walk away completely, rejecting the mirror, or to look deeply and embrace what has been revealed. This moment is a turning point. Many twin flame pairs separate here because facing the raw reality of the other is unbearable to the ego. But those who choose to stay, not out of dependency but out of awareness, open the door to a new kind of relationship, a bond based not on expectations but on presence. This collapse of projections also marks the beginning of a new vision of oneself. When we stop seeing the other as savior or villain, we start seeing our own wounds, insecurities, and fragmentations more clearly. The twin flame then ceases to be a stage for our projections and becomes a clean mirror, capable of reflecting our essence with honesty. And this is liberating, because from this point on, we no longer need the other to tell us who we are. We begin to remember for ourselves. It is here that individuation, as Jung described, truly becomes possible. Without projections, we can see the other as a separate but deeply connected being, no longer as an extension of our desire, but as a soul companion whose mission is to challenge, heal, and elevate us. And at the same time, we are capable of offering this back in a cycle of conscious and loving exchange. To see the soul behind the mirror is, therefore, one of the greatest signs the journey has reached its peak. There are no more masks, no power games, no need disguised as passion. There are only two naked souls, recognizing one another, breaking free from illusions and choosing to walk side by side. not because they need to, but because they want to. This is the true encounter, one that is only possible when projection dies and love is born. Reaching the final stage of the twin flame journey is, essentially, passing through the dark night of the soul and emerging with transformed consciousness. One of the deepest elements of this process is the integration of the shadow, a central concept in Jung's analytical psychology. The shadow represents all that the ego rejects, represses, or denies: fears, anger, envy, traumas, forbidden impulses, weaknesses. Throughout life, humans struggle to keep this shadow out of awareness, but the twin flame relationship makes this impossible. This connection acts as a precise mirror, mercilessly revealing what is most hidden in the unconscious. The presence of the twin flame inevitably triggers the confrontation with the shadow, not because the other is the problem, but because they activate, with their light and reflection, the unresolved aspects of the psyche. This may appear as intense jealousy, fear of abandonment, control, sudden anger, chronic insecurity. Often we project these contents onto the other, accusing them of bringing out the worst in us. But according to Jung, this is precisely the invitation to individuation. The shadow is not an enemy to be eliminated, but a part of us that must be recognized, integrated, and healed. During the early stages of the connection, the tendency is to resist the shadow, try to hide it, or blame the other for its appearance. However, as the journey evolves and approaches its peak, it becomes impossible to ignore these contents. The pain intensifies, not because something is wrong, but because we are being called to face ourselves. And this gaze requires courage, maturity, and willingness to die symbolically, to die to the ego, to the persona, to the characters we create to survive in the world. When we finally surrender to this process and embrace our shadow, a profound internal shift occurs. We stop seeking outside the salvation that can only come from within. The anger we felt toward the other reveals itself as our own unacknowledged pain. The fear of rejection exposes the absence of self-acceptance. Control reveals itself as a reflection of inner abandonment. And in this radical dive inward, something new begins to emerge: true individuality. For Jung, individuality is not isolation, but wholeness. It is the state in which the human being recognizes themselves as unique, singular, but deeply connected to the whole. The twin flame in this context is the provocation and the guide. It pushes us, often forcefully, toward this state of wholeness. But this wholeness is only possible when we reconcile with all parts of our psyche, including the darkest ones. By integrating the shadow, the individual becomes whole, not perfect, but authentic, not ideal, but real. This authenticity marks the beginning of a new way of relating. Love is no longer based on need, manipulation, or dependence. It becomes free, conscious, compassionate. The other is no longer responsible for our happiness, but a companion who helps us keep the mirror clean with love and presence. And this kind of love is only possible between two beings who have passed through the fire of the shadow and been reborn. In the final stages of the journey, there is no longer a need to hide imperfections. They are seen with tenderness. Conflict, when it arises, is no longer a threat, but an opportunity for deepening. The presence of the other does not oppress nor consume, it expands. And this expansion is the direct fruit of reconciliation with what we were taught to deny in ourselves. The shadow ceases to dominate because it has been embraced. And when this happens, the self, the regulating center of the psyche, according to Jung, takes command of the inner life. At this point, the reunion between twin flames is no longer a desperate search, but a natural consequence of inner transformation. The bond ceases to be a prison and becomes liberation. And the union, when it happens, is the celebration of two souls that have traversed the underworld of themselves and chosen to be reborn, not as halves completing each other, but as wholes recognizing each other. The integration of the shadow is not just one stage of the journey. It is the key that unlocks the purest, clearest, and most transformative love. And when it happens, it is impossible not to notice. Something within us has died, something within us has been born, and nothing will ever be the same again. The twin flame journey is not about finding someone to complete you, but about remembering who you are when you stop running from yourself. Each phase of this path, The dissolution of the ego, the synchronicities, the collapse of projections, and the integration of the shadow is an invitation to the deepest transformation the soul can experience. When these signs begin to appear, it is not the end of love, it is the beginning of real love, rooted in consciousness and wholeness. The final stage is not a point of arrival, but a state of presence, a place where the other is seen not with the eyes of need, but with the clarity of one who recognizes their own essence reflected. And when this happens, the reunion becomes sacred, not because it fills a void, but because it expands a completeness already achieved. If this content touched something deep within you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Your journey matters, and it deserves to be accompanied with awareness. And now watch the video appearing on the screen, because it may be the next step in your path of awakening and integration.